Just hang in there for a little while. We'll move straight along now to Daryl Killin from the Aboriginal Carbon Fund.
Thanks very much, Bram. And I've got a presentation which is going to fire up there. So I'm here to talk to you about a bunch of hot air, greenhouse gases, and how they can be looked at as a form of agribusiness, because basically it is just another form of agribusiness, this carbon farming market. I mean, you guys talk about live weight gain in kilos. We talk about tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent per hectare or per area. So we have metrics, you have metrics. We have suppliers and purchasers. We have contracts. This whole carbon market, despite common perceptions, is actually maturing around from a technical point of view. I know the general perception out there is that with the carbon tax being repealed, that investment has dried up, and that's true to a certain extent. But there are some opportunities. The Emissions Reduction Fund is actually going to expand the breadth of the market. So anyway, so my name's Daryl Killin. I'm a forester. I've been working in North Queensland for 22 years in the forestry industry, and I'm working with Aboriginal Carbon Fund now. We work with traditional owners to help them benefit, and Indigenous organisations to help them benefit from carbon farming, but we don't work exclusively with Indigenous groups. We're happy to work with anyone, and we're out here to have a chat to you guys. So there's five of us. There's two on the board. Alan and David Ross. Alan Cooney's used to head up the Australian Antarctic Division. We did lose one of our board members a couple of weeks ago. Tracker Tilma passed away. But the three workers of the team are Rowan Foley, myself and Jeremy. Rowan's an ex-ranger. He's a general manager in Alice Springs. I'm a forester based here in Cairns, and Jeremy's a lawyer based in Melbourne. This is where we work at the moment. We're Australia-wide. A lot of those projects are Indigenous projects, but we're covering the whole of Australia, and that's some of our projects there. I've only got 10 minutes, so I'm going to move through quickly. So what I want to do is give you a really quick overview of the new policy around carbon farming, in particular relating to savanna burning and how it relates to the Gulf, and explain quickly about what savanna burning, give you an update on the new low rainfall methodology which is coming in, and talk about future NRM carbon farming opportunities. Questions can wait till the panel. Okay, what's the Carbon Farming Initiative? Yes, it still exists. It's an incentive scheme to encourage carbon projects on the land. Landowners farm carbon, produce a commodity, and sell it to a buyer. That buyer in the past was regulated, and it was the big emitters were buying the carbon, and now the government's going to buy the carbon. So gone from a situation where we had a labour run scheme that was actually developing a market-based instrument whereby the polluters were paying. Now we've got a government-run scheme where consolidated revenue is being used by a coalition to purchase credits on land. So that's how it actually works now. Consolidated revenue, taxpayers' money is now funding these projects direct, and that's going to run through a reverse auction process where it's going to be a blind auction, and people have to bid into the auction, and the government's going to buy the cheapest carbon first and then move up the cost curve. So that's a real brief summary of how the actual policy, where the rubber hits the road. So these are the steps. Just like you want to get a cattle to market, you go through a series of steps. We go through a series. You have to identify the methodology to farm carbon. You apply for the project. You then have to report on the project. You get crediting period, and you have compliance. So just like any other industry, we have steps involved in the process about taking our product to market. And just in case you're wondering about the scale, there's from December 2011 to March 2015, there's 212 projects registered with the Clean Energy Regulator for carbon farming right around Australia, with about $14.6 million. And you can do the maths. I mean, we don't know the price of each of those carbon credits, but it's going to be somewhere between, I estimate, between $17 and $20 a tonne. times by 17 or 20 times by 14.6 million. You can do the maths on that's actual real trades that have occurred since 2011. These are real projects getting real money to do real things. So we're moving to, as I said, direct action plan. This is where the scope of carbon farming is going to increase. The scope is going to increase. The government's hoping the price is going to come down, but there's debate about whether it's actually going to happen or not. So we have fossil fuel and industrial emissions are now included. So things like energy efficiency, there's going to be a whole bunch of new methodologies coming out, and that's what the ERF is. The Emissions Reduction Fund is going to include urban-based solutions. The Carbon Farming Initiative, which has been existing since 2011, is about vegetation and land. So they're allocating $2.5 billion in this Emissions Reduction Fund over the forward estimates for the next 4 years have been allocated by the government to fund real projects in vegetation and land and fossil fuel emissions reduction. These are some of the cycles of carbon. You've got 450, these are million tonnes. So there's a cycle of inputs to vegetation and outputs. This is the output from fossil fuel burning, 23 million. This is in Australia. And this is some of the cycles are in the ocean. So you've got, obviously, the oceans act as a carbon sink, the vegetation acts as a carbon sink, and then you've got emissions from industrial uses. I've got to keep going fast here. So, you used to have a fixed price of carbon, $24 a tonne. That was going to transition this year to a market-based instrument whereby people would negotiate the price. That's gone, carbon tax gone. We've now got a reverse auction process whereby you bid, as I said, into an auction. The first auction is in a month. So it's actually April the 17th or 16th, somewhere thereabouts. And you put in your bid and you say, well, I'm going to bid for $15 a tonne. And someone else is going to bid for $18 a tonne. And the government's going to go along and they're going to pick the cheapest carbon and they're going to buy up the cost curve until they get their target allocation. This is going to start happening next month. The average price is going to be published. We won't know the individual prices that the contracts are signed between the government and the project proponents, but they might start at $10 a tonne for a landfill and go right up to $30 a tonne for some reforestation projects, and the average price could be $17. Please don't quote me on these figures. But that's $17 a tonne will be published by the government. That's the only figure that will be published. We won't know the spread, the volume, the price of individual projects. All that will be hidden in a black box. So, specifically in relation to savanna burning, I just want to draw your attention to two maps here. This is the existing methodology. And this is the boundary line, projects north of that line. You can do savanna burning projects, so it's burning savanna country early. I'll explain what that's about shortly. That's the current rule up until last week. Last week, off the press, they've now combined these two methodologies and it's increased the area. This is what's relevant to this meeting today. It's now changed the area of the zone down to what they call the 600mm line. This is 600mm rainfall line. Now I know it changes with every year, but this is the government's line. They're not moving it, it's going to stay there, right? So if you're here, it's just too bad. This now opens up the opportunity for all this country previously which couldn't participate in savanna burning to now look at savanna burning opportunities. And that's only been released last week. This map here summarises the areas that burn, roughly the areas that are red burn the most, and the areas that are green burn the least. So you can see the largest potential for emissions reduction is in the northern areas, and that's why that first 1,000mm rainfall cut-off was made. However, there is still some potential for projects to occur in this area here. So everyone goes, well, when you when you burn forest, you burn it late, you burn it early, you're releasing carbon emissions. It doesn't make any sense, right? That's what everyone says, it doesn't make any sense. Well, let me explain to you in simple terms. When you have a lake fire in December, the trees burn, the place goes off, temperatures are high, a lot of the fuel's destroyed. These are your emissions, 100% of your emissions there, okay? When you burn in July, you still have emissions. The country, not as many of the trees get killed, not as many of the coarse fuel doesn't burn as much. So you have less emissions. So the relative difference between that and this, that's what we're selling. We're selling that emissions reduction from here down to here. And this all gets quantified by a model, a computer program that's read from satellite. So you don't have to be you don't have to be a PhD student to run this thing. It's a publicly available tool that tells you how many carbon credits you're entitled to. So there's a couple of requirements for land. So if you hold title to your land, you're entitled to run a savanna burning project until they have this, what they call the sequestration component. So at the moment, if you own the land, you have the right to carry out the project. And as I said, there's projects going on left, right and centre. We were involved in Cow and Yarma project that went through last January. There was a significant six-figure amount of money. These are real projects that are carrying on Cape York and across the Kimberley at the moment. Later on, they're going to introduce this sequestration component. So that's the proportion of the trees that get kept from the fire, and that's going to come into the methodology down the track. Now, before I talk about grasslands and trees and vegetation thickening and all that sort of stuff, I need to emphasise that under the rules, there's ineligible vegetation types and eligible vegetation types. The intent of the methodology is not to burn grasslands. If you burn grasslands, it's ineligible. So this is not about burning grasslands and introducing woody thickening into grasses. It's about burning country that's already got forest on it and just burning that same country earlier. It's not about grasslands. So these are all the savanna burning projects that have been registered across Northern Australia. I've got the dog, so I'll keep going. With the savanna burn, you have a baseline that gets calculated over 10 years, or 15 years for the new methodology. So you work out your average emissions, there it is there. Then you have a project and you calculate the difference between what you emitted that year and your average emissions, and you sell that on the market or to the government to earn credits. There's this thing called SAVBAT, Savanna Burning Abatement Tool. You plug in there when you burnt, as long as it's done before the 1st of August, it tells you how many credits you've earned. It's all done, being paid for by the government. So, this is really quick Carbon 101. I know there's going to be a lot of questions. In summary, carbon farming is here to stay. It's another form of agribusiness. There's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there, but it is something to consider as part of a broader Gulf Savanna strategy for landowners to consider. Doesn't mean they're going to make the next squillion out of it, but it is part of looking at your land management. It's not just planting trees, it's good land management. There are new CFI methodologies, including, might I add, methodologies to switch from urea licks to nitrate licks for cattle. There's a methodology approved for that. You can earn carbon credits right now, today, from switching from urea licks to nitrate licks. So there are cattle methodologies that are coming on board. And in relation to NRM planning, we do need to build in carbon farming and take it out of the politics and put it into the farming sector. It's just another form of farming. It's an agribusiness. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daryl.